Okay, so now I'll explain absorption costing. First, I'll just give you all an introduction. Okay, so in marginal costing, we gave importance to variable and fixed costs. Okay, but in absorption, we care more about the function of the cost, that is, whether it is a production cost or whether it is a selling cost. So, if you'll remember, in marginal, my main classifications were variable and fixed, and then within variable, I had recorded production and sales, and then within fixed, also I had recorded production and sales. But my main headings were variable and fixed. Whereas in absorption, my costs are grouped as production costs and selling costs, and then within production, I can have a distinction of fixed and variable costs, and then within sales, I have again fixed and variable costs. Okay, so again, like marginal was helping you decide, right, what price to quote. Absorption costing tells you how much of a cost center one function is becoming, right? So you know कि भाई production costs control करने हैं मेरे या selling costs control करने हैं, which is my pain point. It helps you identify that. All right, now what happens in, so the why is the word absorption used is because we are determining an amount of cost that needs to be absorbed by that product. Okay, the product is carrying the burden of this cost, it is absorbing that cost. All right, now so in absorption costing, basically we arrive at one estimate of production cost, which is just blanketly applied and considered in the cost sheet of the unit or the unit of production. Okay. So the important thing here is to realize that this exercise is done before production happens. Okay. So I use an estimate for my production cost. Now, when it comes to my selling costs, at that time I'm already aware of the number of units that got sold. So this arbitrary estimate that I'm taking, that is done only for my production costs. Okay, selling is charged on actuals. Therefore, my selling costs, fixed and variable, are exactly the same as marginal costing. What changes is my cost of production. Why does my cost of production change in absorption? Because I'm absorbing an arbitrary amount, okay, which is an estimate. Because it is an estimate, there arises a difference between the estimate and actual, which is my over absorption or under absorption, which also needs to be adjusted. Okay, now if that introduction did not make sense to you, it's completely fine, because with the sum, it should all become clear to you. So let us, and after the sum as well, I'll recap the whole process. So let's start with the absorption costing sheet. All right. So my first amount, as usual, I record my sales. So let's take the rate of sales, that is my sales price per unit, from our marginal calculation, because that remains the same. Oops. Okay, that's 2000. So my amount of sales becomes units into my price per unit. So that's 3,20,000. It's wrong. 1 second. Okay. All right, it's fine. Okay, moving to production costs. So variable production costs remain the same. So that is 220. And my rate, I'll just take it from my marginal rate, which was here, right? 800. And my amount becomes the number of units into this rate. So it is 1,76,000. Now the trick arises in this line item. So in absorption, this amount can be absorbed at anything that the company decides. Okay. So like sir gave the example, there was one about it's absorbed at 50% of my labor cost, right? In this question, we are absorbing fixed production cost as divided by my number of units produced. Okay. So like here we see that my budgeted production fixed costs were 1,60,000. So I record that, and my budgeted output as how much I expected to produce was 800. So what we have done is we found a rate of absorption by dividing my fixed production overheads by my number of units. Now technically what I want to drive home here is that वेरिएबल में भी अपन ऐसा ही रेट निकालते थे, बट इन वेरिएबल दैट रेट इज करेक्ट बिकॉज वेरिएबल पर यूनिट से चेंज हो रहा है. फिक्स्ड कॉस्ट है ना, वो पर यूनिट से नहीं चेंज हो रहा है, मैंने आर्बिट्रली उसको बना दिया पर यूनिट. ठीक है, जस्ट फॉर द पर्पसेस ऑफ फाइंडिंग माई एस्टिमेट. तो मेरे को ये रेट आ गया 200 and then my production in the first quarter was 220 units. Therefore, I multiplied this rate by my production to get my absorption fixed cost as 44,000. Okay, so I record this 44,000 here. Okay, oops, not here, it is over here as my fixed production cost. Okay, so again, like I said, in marginal fixed production cost में अपन ने कोई per unit rate नहीं निकाला because marginal respects that fixed production एक lump sum cost है. ठीक है. All right. So yeah, so I recorded my variable production cost like marginal and fixed के लिए मैंने ये calculation करके fixed cost लिखा. All right. Now the total of these two costs is my total cost of production. Okay. Now अपना standard adjustment आ गया कि भाई प्रोड्यूस तो 220 की है बट सेल तो 160 का हुआ, तो 60 का कॉस्ट मेरे को निकालना है. ऑलराइट, तो 60 का कॉस्ट अपन दो तरीके से निकाल सकते हैं. बेसिकली 220 यूनिट्स का खर्चा इतना है, तो 60 का कितना, सिंपल क्रॉस मल्टीप्लिकेशन से आई नो इट्स गोइंग टू बी 60,000. सो लेट्स डू दैट. लेट्स ऐड द, हाँ ठीक है. सो दिस 60,000 का कॉस्ट आई विल सब्ट्रैक्ट फ्रॉम माय कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन to get the cost of goods sold. Okay. Again, to reiterate, first I segregated into production costs. Within production costs, I grouped fixed and variable. Variable मैंने normal marginal जैसे calculate किया. Fixed में I just divided it by number of units arbitrarily, found a rate, multiplied it by number of units produced, got an amount, and that amount I recorded here. Okay, तो मुझे मिला cost of goods sold. Now what happens is, by the time I'm finished with my production, I find out कि भाई मेरा साल का अगर fixed 160 हो रहा है, it means कि I need to record this at 40,000, which is, this is 12 महीने का, तो I need to find out for the 1 quarter, which is divided by 4. But the rate that I absorbed this fixed production cost was sadly 44,000, which means that I punished my product by 4,000 rupees extra. जबकि मैंने 40,000 ही चार्ज करना चाहिए था, I charged 44,000 to it. That means I was over recovering my fixed cost by 4,000 bucks, right? So this is a case of over absorption. Now, whenever there is over absorption, you deduct that amount from your cost because you charge something extra which you should not have. All right. So after making the closing stock adjustment, we will subtract the over absorption, which is this 4,000, which is 44 minus 40. Okay. Yeah. So now let's come to my selling and distribution costs. Like I said, that remains exactly like my marginal cost. Therefore, for variable, I find the rate like I did in marginal. So I'll use the same rate just from this sheet. Variable selling and distribution. So iska rate hai 400. And I multiply this 400 by my number of units. Okay, so my variable cost is 64,000, and for fixed selling and distribution overhead, just like marginal, because the cost is 2,40,000, but we are doing this only for 1 quarter, I divide that 2,40,000 by 4 and I get 60,000. So these become my total selling and distribution costs, right? Now, what is my cost of sales, which is like my entire cost now? So it is my cost of goods sold minus the over absorption plus my selling and distribution costs. Oops. Okay. and my net profit becomes this sale minus the cost of sales, and therefore my profit comes to 40,000. Okay. Now, again, I'll just recap everything that we did. First, unlike marginal, we were doing sales and then variable costs and then fixed costs and then profit. That is not what we are doing here. We are doing sales, we are doing production costs, selling costs, and then profit. Okay. Within for selling costs, the treatment is just like marginal, where variable is treated like variable, fixed is treated like fixed. So let's keep selling costs aside. Within production costs, we know there is some adjustment. Within production, again, variable is treated like variable, there is no change. Fixed is absorbed on some basis that the company decides. In this case, it has decided to do it by number of units. So we took the budgeted overheads, divided it by number of units, treated it like a variable cost, found the rate of absorption, multiplied it by number of units, and we decided कि हम 44,000 पे cost absorb करेंगे. Okay, so here we charge the cost of production as 44,000. Then we did the closing stock adjustment because sales 160 units का है तो अपन ने 60 units का cost हटा दिया and we came to cost of goods sold. Now there is one more adjustment pending here कि यहाँ पे मैंने 44,000 charge किया है जबकि मैंने 4,000 करना चाहिए था. So I deduct my over absorbed fixed manufacturing overhead, which is 4,000. So finally my net profit becomes my sales minus my production cost, minus my over absorption, minus my selling and distribution costs, and then I get my net profit. All right. So we are almost done. The only other point that I want to convey is that in this case, अपन ने 44,000 decide किया था और actual 40 निकला. There is a chance कि actual 44 से ज़्यादा निकलता था. In that case, there would have been an under recovery, right? जबकि खर्चा 48,000 हो रहा है, मेरे प्रोडक्ट ने सिर्फ 44,000 अब्जॉर्ब किया है, तो 4,000 मैंने अंडर रिकवर किए हैं जो मुझे मेरे कॉस्ट में ऐड करने पड़ेंगे बिकॉज इट शुड हैव बीन हायर बाय 4,000. सो इन दैट केस इंस्टेड ऑफ सब्ट्रैक्टिंग ओवर अब्जॉर्प्शन आई वुड हैव added under absorption. All right, and that concludes this caselet on absorption costing.